And we're back with the chairman of the RNC, Priebus. Mr. Chairman, on Friday, Donald Trump said he no longer believes that Barack Obama was born somewhere other than the United States. For 5 years, though, he spent a lot of time on this issue. And he now says that he's the one who was out there just trying to put this rumor to rest. Do you really believe that's what he was doing for 5 years?
Well, I think that it was something that got started in the 2008 presidential campaign. Whose fault it was, Hillary Clinton herself, her supporters, her interns, her staffers. Clearly, it was something that was circulating in 2008. I'm agreeing with you that he took it further. He took it further,
right,
and he brought it into the public debate even more so than what was brought in 2008. However, the point is, people are asking him about it. People weren't asking him about it for a long time, and he came out and said, listen, I was involved in trying to figure this out as well, and I've determined that the president was born in Hawaii, just like I've said for years. So this is not, like, for me, a mystery.
So there's also no evidence that Hillary Clinton herself had anything to do with this. There's some rumors that people on her staff, and there was one person who was caught spreading rumors about Barack Obama's religion, and they were fired.
People get convicted every single day with circumstantial evidence that is enough to tip the scale. And by the preponderance of evidence before us, Hillary Clinton or her campaign were definitely involved in this issue. So we can't keep saying it's not true. That's ridiculous.
But
I know you didn't, but there's enough media people out there claiming that that's not true, as if it's some fiction. It's not fiction, it's a truth.
But when you think about it, may be contributory, but Donald Trump spent the bulk of his time.
But he's not denying it.
No, I understand that. But I guess my point is
this. But she's denying it, and that's ridiculous.
My point, well, her former campaign manager said.
All right, so everyone around her is involved, but not her, so therefore she's
everyone
innocent.
Around her is a little more than the evidence would support.
Her campaign deputy manager was apologizing on CNN 3 days ago for it.
But she said she fired the one person who brought it up immediately. There's a difference between firing a person immediately. And
what about Sid Blumenthal? Was he involved or not?
Well, let's assume that he was. So you have a person. So you have a person spreading rumors, and then you have somebody making a 5-year crusade, holding press conferences, and spending money. Here's my question to you, which is not to figure out the details anymore, but to ask you this question. Donald Trump said Republicans love this idea in 2011 when he talked about it, and congratulated himself for reinvigorating the investigation of it. The question is, did the nominee of the Republican Party use this issue as a political issue to rile up Republicans? And is this the kind of thing that gets Republicans excited? The question of whether the president was born in America.
I don't think that was his assertion. This is my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't think Donald Trump was thinking about 2016 and 2011. It was an issue that he was interested in. It was an issue that I believe, and I think the preponderance of evidence shows Hillary Clinton started it. And after getting this issue resolved, he proclaimed on Friday that he believed that the president was born in America, just like I have as chairman of the Republican Party, and I never believed that he wasn't born in the United States of America.
We'll have to hold it right there. We'll take a commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Nation. I'm John Dickerson. We continue with the chairman of the Republican Party, Priebus. So we'll leave the previous issue. You once said that the way the Electoral College works, Democrats just have to be good. Republicans need to be nearly perfect. Is Donald Trump running a nearly perfect campaign?
Well, let me tell you something. I know this would be a fascinating year for everybody, and we all know that. But I have been, and I think people need to get outside this beltway and get on the road. If they were to see what I would see, I see one of the greatest ground game movements on the ground, meaning people coming to events, 20,000 in Middle Pennsylvania, 22,000 in Seattle. This is probably one of the biggest movements as far as people across this country in modern history. And so while everyone loves to analyze Donald Trump all day long, 24/7 on cable, I think people have to look at what the facts are. And we're tied today. As we sit here 51 days from the election, and we have a candidate that is capturing the electorate, America. It might not be capturing the pundits, but he's capturing America.
Is he capturing the reluctant Republicans, some of whom are public officials in the Republican Party, who are either in the never Trump or who are in the barely Trump category, which...
Well, I mean, some of the people who ran for president. I mean, but what you have to look at is where are we at with the voters. And where we're at with the voters is one of the last polls that I just saw, nearly 90% of Republicans, I think Mitt was about 91, 92. We need to do a couple more percentage points better, and we're doing that as we move forward. But look, people who agreed to support the nominee that took part in our process, they used tools from the RNC. They agreed to support the nominee. They took part in our process. We're a private party. We're not a public entity. Those people need to get on board. And if they're thinking they're going to run again someday, I think that we're going to evaluate the process of the nomination process, and I don't think it's going to be that easy for them.
Would the party itself penalize somebody who does not make good on the pledge that they made to support the party's nominee?
I think these are things that our party is going to look at in the process, and I think that people who gave us their word, used information from the RNC, should be on board. I mean, if you want to take part in the process, sure.
Governor John Kasich. So if he wants to run again, seems like he might want to, he might be out of luck as far as the RNC goes.
Well, look, people in our party are talking about what we're going to do about this. I mean, there's a ballot access issue in South Carolina. In order to be on the ballot in South Carolina, you actually have to pledge your support to the nominee no matter who that person is. So what's the penalty for that? It's not a threat. It's just a question that we have a process in place. And if a private entity puts forward a process and has agreement with the participants in that process, and those participants don't follow through with the promises that they made in that process, what should a private party do about that if those same people come around in 4 or 8 years?
Sounds like a brush pack pitch. But let me ask you one last question. Donald Trump said at one point the debates were rigged because of the nights they were on. He's claimed the moderators are rigged. You have been a part of this process. Has the process been fair? Does it feel fair to you at this point?
Well, there are two parts of that. I mean, as far as our party is concerned, I think I've been straight up and fair the whole way through. And I think people have evaluated what we've done, and I think people understand that I think I played it straight down the middle from beginning to the end. I do think the media, especially in the cable 24/7 world, is totally obsessed with negative 6-minute segments on Donald Trump, no matter what it is. And I think that part of it is very unfair.
But the debate part so far, as far as the nights that's happening, who the moderators are, all that, it's all seems square to you? Or
I think it's square. And I think people are ready to move forward and move on with this. And I think, that first debate is going to be probably one of the biggest events in the history of presidential politics.
All right. Mr. Chairman, thanks so much for being with us.
You bet.
And we'll be right back. And we're back with our political panel. Ruth Marcus is the deputy editorial page editor and columnist at the Washington Post. Rehan Salam is the executive editor with the National Review. Mark Leibovich is the chief national correspondent for the New York Times Magazine and a CBS News contributor. Ruth, I want to start with you. The responses to this explosion in New York overnight, Donald Trump got off the plane, immediately said a bomb went off. Turns out he was right. Hillary Clinton said we got to wait for the details. Is that a frame through which we should look at the two candidates?
I think it's actually pretty telling. He turned out to be right, but might not have. I think that, look, I'm a fact girl, so I think the response, I'd like to wait for the facts until I comment, is always a good idea. I think both of them could have behooved them to express some concern for the victims, which seems to be something that's forgotten in all of this.
Yeah, Rehan, I want to ask you about this op-ed by Secretary Robert Gates. Attacked both candidates, criticized both candidates for their weaknesses. Hillary Clinton not trustworthy enough. Donald Trump said he was thin-skinned, didn't have the temperament for the job. Does this matter? Does he raise important questions about this? And was Donald Trump's calling him a clown, does that matter, or is that just what we're used to from Donald Trump?
My sense is that Donald Trump's style, the braggadocio and what have you, is basically priced in for voters. What I saw happen this week was something very different and very interesting. If you look at the surveys, it looks as though Hillary Clinton's support with the Obama coalition is softening. If you look at younger voters, millennial voters, it's softening pretty drastically. Even if you look at, for example, younger black men, it seems that there's some weakness here. Whereas if you look at Donald Trump, there's certainly what folks in many media outlets talk about. They talk about the birther controversy, among other things, which I'm sure we'll talk more about now. But what has he been doing? He has proposed a new social program for working mothers. He went on the Dr. Oz show, which, by the way, is a show that's watched by many of the voters he's seeking to reach, and he praised Medicaid and suggested that we ought to expand the Medicaid program further. So when you think about trying to get through one channel, the people who read the Wall Street Journal editorial page, let's say, and then trying to reach another channel, think about the married white women in a state like Pennsylvania, the people that he hasn't been able to reach, the people who've been reluctant to join his campaign. It's not obvious to me that he hasn't done a decent job of doing an end run around certain kinds of media criticism and reaching those people.
Yeah, and the polls have tightened a little. And Mark, then if we're picking up on Rehan's point about those kinds of voters, the reintroduction of the idea that for 5 years Donald Trump was the advocate for the idea that Barack Obama was not born in the United States. Does that matter to those kinds of voters? Is that why he finally came out and said, yes, he was born here?
I think it does matter to those kinds of voters. I mean, I think the lead that Hillary Clinton opened up in August was a lot of sort of softening Republicans. I mean, Rehan mentioned softening of the Obama coalition. I mean, I think a lot of these were sort of squishy Republicans who would listen to someone like Susan Collins, who said that she wouldn't vote for Donald Trump. There's like this divide between Republicans who actually know who Robert Gates is and those who don't. I mean, he's obviously a very well-respected figure in the Republican Party, or at least the establishment of the Republican Party. I was actually somewhat surprised by how critical he was of Hillary Clinton, who he apparently was an ally, or I thought had been an ally of pretty closely during the Obama years when they both served together. I do think that the kind of language he used, he said beyond repair, I think were the exact words, is the kind of damning language that does sort of put the fear of, actually pulling the lever for him into a lot of the suburban Republicans in Philadelphia or Cleveland, what have you. One
thing that's been interesting, Ruth, in the Clinton conversations you have with their staffers is for the last several weeks they've said, we realize we have to be out there talking about solutions. Now that's been interrupted by her comments about the half of the Trump supporters being in the basket of deplorables, her health issues. Now other things are getting in the way. What does that tell you, though, that this late in the campaign they're feeling like we still have to make the case for Hillary Clinton?
And she still feels like she has to make the case. That's part of what she's thinking about in the debates. It has been impossible. It's actually impossible even for Donald Trump's policy now that it's coming to break through Donald Trump. And so she's had a hard time either talking about individual policies in this campaign, but even larger, talking about the larger vision that she has for the country and for getting people to like her / trust her. This is a big challenge in the debate, in addition to kind of simultaneously trying to fact check Donald Trump.
I want to get back to the debate in a minute and the question of whether one can fix one's liabilities in a debate. But Rehan, on this question of Donald Trump's view on the president's birth, he has asked us, and his campaign has asked us, to look back at his business career for an idea of how he'd be president. Look at his judgment on foreign policy, on the various things he may or may not have said. They now want this not to be a conversation, the question of the president's birth. But you can't just say it's over.
Oh, I think it's pretty clear that Donald Trump talked about this, raised questions about this for many years. But again, as I suggested earlier, the thing is that this may well be very relevant and motivating for some voters. It is not clear to me that those voters for whom this is a pressing and important issue are voters that Donald Trump was ever going to be able to win regardless. Now, let's look at a state like Florida. In Mark Leibovich's newspaper, The New York Times, you have a new report on survey findings in Florida. What you see is that, back in 2008, Hillary Clinton was well to the right of Barack Obama on some immigration issues. Now she is well to his left in terms of how she talks about them, how she talks about deportation relief, and much else. Yet, if you look at Hispanic voters, Barack Obama the last time around won 60% of those voters. Hillary Clinton is well behind Barack Obama's mark among Hispanic voters. Now, they're not going to Donald Trump, but it seems like a lot of them are demotivated. Yeah. And this is a pattern you see not just in Florida, but many other states besides. And so a state like Florida that many people assumed, because of Hillary Clinton's big push on immigration and amnesty and other issues, would be in the bag for her. She is struggling there. So, is she struggling with the kind of voters for whom talk of the birther controversy is really meaningful? Yes. And actually, it may well make sense that by magnifying this, by talking about this, that could help motivate some of those voters. But, again, is that going to get her over the bar? We'll see.
I'm just going to disagree with Rehan on the question of whether this is an issue that could affect voters who would otherwise be for Trump. I think there's two. First of all, it is astonishing that we are debating this this late in the game. It's something that Donald Trump, if he didn't put it away in 2011, should have put away way earlier this cycle. And the notion that Kellyanne Conway, you asked her about why Donald Trump was lying about the president's birth and his suggestion that he wasn't born in America for the last 5 years. She said, you'll have to ask him. That means case is not closed, and definitely. And so I think the voters who can be affected by this are voters who they might not be voters who would go for Trump, but they're voters who might have thought about staying home in the polls, or they're voters who might have been
By the way, I agree with Ruth.
tempted by Gary Johnson or Jill Stein, and now get enraged and scared about the notion of Trump being president.
That's pretty much my view as well.
Mark, I hear two things. I hear on the right people saying this is the press obsessed with this question of Obama's birth to not cover policy that Trump's actually talking about. On the left, I hear don't fall for Donald Trump talking about birther things. Pay attention to the foundation and other things. What's the right way to look at this?
Well, I would say, look, the notion that Donald Trump settled this debate for like however many years, and we're still, when was this ever a debate? I mean, it was a debate on the fringes in certain sectors. Donald Trump, I mean, has been well documented, spent 5 years doing it. Whether voters respond to it or not, it's appalling. It's appalling on its face to actually watch this argument play out. It's edifying to no one. I mean, the facts are very, very clear. And, just speaking as one human being, maybe I'm in the media, so I'm suspect. I find it appalling. I think many people do. Whether it plays out electorally or not, I mean, I think it's clear that we make clear, what we're talking about here.
Ruth, let's move to the debates. Everybody's saying, Reince Priebus said, the biggest political event in the world. Is that good, by the way, just to have that much focus on a single thing?
It is what it is. And I think to the extent that, Donald Trump is helping to generate the biggest ratings ever, the more voters pay attention, the more voters are engaged, even if they haven't been engaged beforehand, the better off we are. And it's actually why it's really important that we have 3 debates, not 1 debate, so that people aren't affected by one single thing. You can clean up, you can go back to issues.
Ram, what should we be looking for in the debates?
Well, one thing I'll just throw out there is that back in 2012, Bill Clinton at the Democratic National Convention felt like it was really important that Republicans wanted to cut the Medicaid program. The fact that Donald Trump now is saying he wants to expand it is just completely not an issue, and that's pretty amazing, and that tells you something about the debates. In the first debate between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney was able to do an end run around a lot of the media conversation about his campaign and connect directly with voters and present a very different face. Now, I'm not sure if Donald Trump is capable of doing that, but imagine if he does. Imagine if he shows the many ways that he appears to be not like other Republicans, for better or for worse, by the way. That's something where he's going to have a direct channel to an audience that's been hearing all kinds of messages about him. So that'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I just have a sense, and I could be wrong because I'm not in the room, but I don't think Donald Trump is just sort of crashing on the details of his Medicaid policy just as he prepares for this debate. I mean, I think what's exhilarating to him is that this is a great show. He sees himself foremost as a showman. He thinks that he can handle the stage, handle the moment, and that'll be that. I mean, what the Clinton campaign has said over and over and over again is that, look, 100 million people could watch this. This is a moment to actually get very basic facts and very basically, ads about Donald Trump's history, my own credibility out there. And I think to some degree they see it as kind of almost a writ large version of their convention condensed into a couple of hours.
All right, Mark, we're going to have to leave it there. It's a little more than a week away till that first debate, and thanks all of you for being here. We'll be right back in a moment. Saturday marks the official opening of the new Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture. We visited the museum with a man who spent 15 years working on its establishment, Georgia Congressman John Lewis. Congressman, we're sitting here at a lunch counter. What does that mean to you?
Sitting here, I tell you, mean everything to me. My first nonviolent protest was in 1960 in downtown Nashville, sitting down at a lunch counter on a stool in the local Woolworth store. So this all take me back. I grew up sitting down. I wouldn't be the person that I am today if it hadn't been for taking a seat.
What does it mean to be here inside this building?
It just means everything. To walk in here, to be here, to see this magnificent museum, it's going to continue to take me back. Just walking through here, almost cried. I don't want you to make me cry.
You also spoke at the other end of this mall on the March on Washington. Would you ever have imagined that there would be this kind of a monument?
I never thought, I never dreamed that one day there would be a monument, there would be a museum telling the story and the history of African American from the days of slavery to the present.
What is that story you want people to understand when they come here?
This story is an American story. It tells of our history, our struggle. Through segregation, racial discrimination, but much earlier, the whole system of slavery, the denial of basic constitutional right, the right to vote, the right to get an education. That people suffered, they struggled. People were beaten, arrested, in jail. People died. But they never gave up. They never gave in. They never became bitter or hostile. They kept the faith and they kept dreaming.
When you spoke on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, you said, "Wake up, America. We cannot stop and we will not and cannot be patient." A real sense of urgency. Where are things now in terms of urgency in the fight for social justice?
Well, we have come a distance. We've made a lot of progress. And when people tell me nothing has changed, I feel like saying, come and walk in my shoes. I will show you change. We're one people, and we all must be involved in the struggle that we were involved in during the 50s and the 60s. White people and black people suffered together. They died together to bring about change, to bring down those signs that said white waiting, colored waiting, white men, white women, colored women. Those signs are gone and they will not return. The only places we will see those signs today will be in a book or in a museum like this museum.
Speaking of getting inside of John Lewis's shoes, there's a picture of you here on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Tell me about what happened then.
Well, on March 1965, a group of us, about 600 of us, wanted to walk from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery to dramatize to the nation and to the world that people of color wanted to register to vote. We were walking in an orderly, peaceful, nonviolent fashion. We came to the highest point on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, crossing the Alabama River. Down below we saw a sea of blue, Alabama state troopers. And a man spoke up, the major, said this was an unlawful march, it would not be allowed to continue. And a young man from Dr. King's organization walking beside said, Major, give us a moment to kneel and pray. And the major said, troopers, advance. I said, Major, may I have a word? And he said, there will be no word. And they came toward us, beating us with nightsticks, trampling us with horses, releasing the tear gas. I was hit in the head by a state trooper with a nightstick. Had a concussion at the bridge. I thought I was going to die. I thought I saw death. 2 weeks later, we walked from Selma to Montgomery. And President Johnson made one of the most moving speeches any American president made in modern time on the whole question of voting rights or civil rights. And at the end of that speech, he said, and we shall overcome.
You recently wrote a piece in the Huffington Post about that march from Selma to Montgomery and used it as a way to talk about where we are today. Tell me a little bit about that.
The march of 50 years ago changed America forever. There were hundreds and thousands of people coming from all across America. Priests, rabbis, nuns, ministers, lawyers, doctors, teachers, white, all coming together. It was like a holy walk. And that led to the passage of the Voting Rights Act. There's still a need for people to use nonviolent protests. We should never, ever give up on the right to protest of what is right.
You mentioned nonviolence. Martin Luther King and the Montgomery Story, that comic book that inspired you when you were growing up. In that comic book, it talks about loving thy neighbor. It's a strong part of the nonviolent message that even the people who are hitting you and beating you deserve your love. Where is that message now?
That message is still embedded in many of us. I think we have to teach all of our children, and those of us not so young, that the way of love is a better way. Just respect the dignity and the worth of every human being. We need to continue to get it out there. And if we get it right, I really believe if we get it right in America, maybe it can serve as a model for the rest of the world.
Is that message of loving thy neighbor, is it being lost a little bit?
I think there's some forces in America trying to take us back to another period, but we must not let that happen.
You see that in the presidential campaign this year?
I see it very much so, that there are forces that want to divide us, and we must not be divided. We've come so far, we made so much progress by working and building together. Too many of my friends, too many of my colleagues, young people that I knew in 63 and 64, white and African American, died together. And we must not let their death be in vain.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll be right back. There will be more of our conversation with John Lewis on our website, facethenation.com. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Until next week, for Face the Nation, I'm John Dickerson.